President Rivlin. We will now hear from the party heads. I assume that the perspectives will be different, but before you begin speaking, I think everyone shares one thing, and that's not to be indifferent to what's happening here in this single home that we have, how to strengthen its beams, how to strengthen its spirit. I am honored to call upon Minister of Education and Minister of Diaspora Affairs, Chairman of Abite, Hiehudi Party, Knesset member Naftali Bennett. Distinguished President, honored President, a fascinating speech, and I think an excellent and important continuation to last year's spirit. Honored President of the Supreme Court, Justice Miriam Naor, my good friend, Minister Aryeh Deri, Chairman of the Opposition, Knesset member Yitzhak Herzog Bougie, member of Knesset Ayman Oda, head of the Joint Arab List, Knesset member Zahava Galon, chairman of Meretz, ambassadors, president of the World Jewish Congress, Ambassador Ronald Lauder, president of the IDC, Professor Reichman, and Professor Alex Mintz. I will be brief. I will not speak from my notes because you covered many of the important subjects. I would like to take a historical perspective to understand what our destiny as part of the Jewish people in this generation and where we are going at this time. I'd like to go into a time machine and move 3,000 years back. We are in a sovereign state, a Jewish state, a kingdom, the kingdom of King David, with great political power, economic power. After a few hundred years, the temple was destroyed, and we returned to a second state of lesser power. And 500 years later, the second temple was destroyed. Before the temple was destroyed, and close to the destruction of the temple, Judaism was at the height of its flourishing. We had the sages of the Mishnah, and the Judaism was not stagnant. It was breaking through new boundaries. The goal, of course, was the belief in one God, and from that is derived that every human being is created in God's image, the gift of Shabbat that Judaism gave to the world. Until then, rest was the privilege only of the elites, the rich. And until then, most people in the world did not rest until Judaism brought the Sabbath to the world, and they all adopted the concept of Shabbat. And the approach to learning, that every child is taught to read and write, that also comes from Judaism. And then we entered the period of the exile. During the exile, we changed direction. The destiny of the Jewish people in the diaspora was to survive. What do you do when you need to survive? You withdraw into yourself like a turtle. And for 2,000 years, there was progress, but for 2,000 years, we justifiably moved into survival mode. And many things stagnated. But now we are at home. This is where our home is. And in our home, we can once again break out of that shell and break into a new creativity. We don't need to be afraid. The modern Zionism of Herzl was based on the foundations of an asylum state. True, the Jews were in danger. There was the Dreyfus Affair, but it didn't have to be in Israel. It could be in Uganda. Zionism was based on survival and security. Today, 100 and some years later, is that still our destiny? Survival? Because if that's our destiny, there are better and more safe places than the state of Israel. New Jersey's not bad. Perth, Australia, there's wonderful water sports there. There are safer places than Israel. That's why we need to move into the next generation of Zionism. Zionism based on Judaism, based on destiny. And the common denominator of all the tribes, is it only to survive, to move on? There are important things to lower the cost of living and do a lot of other important things. But it can't be that the state of Israel will make do with a framework that provides services for its citizens. We have a destiny, and that destiny will always be tikkun olam, to repair a wounded world. And just as we brought to the world 3,000 years ago Shabbat, the belief in one God, and that humans were created in God's image, and the tradition of erudition, this too must bring to the world. First of all, what we feel inwardly, we must radiate outward. It's the ABCs of education. Don't preach what you don't practice. We must be, first of all, a state that is a light unto the nations. But reality is very confusing. It's very complex. It's messy. We have the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We have so many different issues. But that's the great thing. We're not talking from an academic ivory tower about some kind of utopia. We're talking about actualizing tikkun olam, repairing the word in a very messy situation. That's the real challenge. The entire foundation of Judaism is the exact opposite of all other religions, where they say to a monk, go to the desert. And Israel says, don't go to the desert, don't climb a mountain, get married, have children, contend with the reality of this world and bring the values into the real world, not into an imaginary utopia that doesn't exist. But as a state, we have to do it too. Let me give you a couple of examples. We've already done it in the world of high-tech. Israel has become a light unto the nations in the world of high-tech, and then that's a miracle. I don't need to expand on that. How many people in the world are alive today because of Israeli stents, and how many people get to work on time because of Waze, and how much each telephone and each computer in the world has an Israeli chip inside. But that's just one area. There are so many other challenges in the new world. And then I think that if we go to the fountain of Judaism, the fountain, the vibrant, not the stagnant, we can find answers there. For example, what do we do in the new world that is going to, where there are going to be far fewer jobs and much more leisure? It sounds like a problem of rich people, but it is a problem. What do? Just sit around and watch TV? No, there has to be some additional meaning. How do we deal with the internet, with the pornography? And we're going to see new generations of that and more. How do we contend as a democratic state in a world that exploits our democracy against us in Lebanon and in Gaza with asymmetric warfare? And here I turn to the president of the Supreme Court. We need law. We need a legal system that is suited to the new situation. To remain with the old laws and the Geneva Convention for the conventional wars where the new world is exploiting that against us, that's immoral. We need to be moral. It is immoral not to protect our citizens when they exploit our morality against us. And in all these things, we need to be trailblazers, and the world will follow us. And I will conclude with something for inside us. The president challenged me, and we have a very good relationship, and I think you gave a very important gift to the state of Israel. I am the minister of education of all children in Israel, Jews, Arabs, ultra-Orthodox, secular, religious. They are all my children, and they are equal regardless of their color, religion, politics, or anything else. But we express this also at an intensity unlike anything ever seen before in the education system. We have set out with the Beaton Committee to empower the Sephardi heritage and tradition, but not from the point of view of discrimination. We're not doing them a favor. We're doing a favor to ourselves. I, Naftali Bennett, studied in a yeshiva high school, and unfortunately, I was never exposed to the heritage, the Sephardi heritage. On the contrary, the Sephardim that the school did a favor to accept had to undergo a process of Ashkenazization and to pray according to our liturgy. And whether they are ultra-Orthodox or modern Orthodox religious people, they had to be like us. And what's the nice thing about the Biton Committee? It's the positiveness. Nobody's bitter. Everyone understands that who lost? I lost. I want my children to know the whole Israeli story, the whole story, alongside Chernichovsky, Rabbi Khalfon, alongside the Ashkenazi liturgy, the Sephardi Piyutim, all the warmth and tolerance of Sephardi Judaism. This is not another chapter. It's not adding a chapter in a history book and checking the checklist. It means integrating and intertwining the Sephardi culture in everything. And we are at a breakthrough in another area too. You've seen in the newspapers that there are mayors who are working to close gaps. We started that with differential budgeting, and in this context I will be a socialist. We take from the strong and give to the weak. I cannot embellish that. There is X amount of money, and not only that the strong areas invest in their children, and that I understand, of course. I discovered when I became minister that the State of Israel and the Ministry of Education invested more per capita in rich children than in poor children. Not deliberately. I can't explain exactly how, but that's what happened. And we are going to blow up all these money bubbles and are redistributing. I am determined and optimistic regarding Israel's Arabs. We are on a very positive direction. Don't misunderstand me. We are in a positive direction. More Arabs want to be part of Israeli society. We even saw this in the almost complete absence of any support in the recent wave of terrorism, although there are those who want to exploit it. But most do not. And for the first time since the establishment of the state, every Arab child will be studying Hebrew from kindergarten, not from the 3rd grade as it has been until now. We are doing. And that is why I'm so optimistic regarding the state of Israel. We have a lot of unresolved problems, I know that, but there are a lot of very, very positive things happening. From Zahava to Ayman and Aryeh, people we have here that with all the arguments we have between us, I would not want to see them, each of them, not represented in the Knesset. Because what's create this amazing experience that is the state of Israel is exactly those different vectors and strengths, religious and universal, that create the whole. I wish us all a lot of Israeli hope. Thank you very much.